356? Yes. All right, comedy gives back. All right.
356.
Hi, this is Alonzo Bodden. I want to welcome you to episode 356 of my podcast, Who's Paying Attention? We've got some special guests today. We're going to get right into this. This Comedy Gives Back is a great organization that helps comedians. During the pandemic, they were helping comics who weren't making any money, mainly openers and features. Us headliners had a few dollars in the bank.
Thank goodness.
They have helped with different things, healthcare, substance abuse, all kind of issues comics have. And now, in light of Dave Chappelle's incident at the Hollywood Bowl last night, they will be teaching self-defense classes to all comedians because we're apparently on our own. Oh Ladies.
Hi, Alonzo.
Hello.
New program in our office. I love it. It's not such a bad idea.
Self-defense and security.
It is getting insane out there. So I'm going to tell you about this because I know that's not why you came, but we want to talk about this because it just happened and it's fresh. And I will say that when Will Smith slapped Chris Rock, a lot of comics were saying, uh-oh, this is open season. And I was one, and now I've been proven wrong. I was like, nah, this is going to be a one-off. People aren't going to be rushing the stage. Well, again, I guess I was wrong. People are rushing the stage. What do you think? What?
Well, I agree with you that people are going to be scared. And comics, right after that happened with Will Smith, there was a huge outpour of comics saying, what's going to happen when we get on stage? Like, people can just come up. There's no security, and we're alone on stage, and the audience is right there, and people were scared. And I think it changed our society a little bit.
Do you think that the attack last night was inspired by, I mean, he was a fanatic, like, obsessed fan, right, who attacked him?
Yeah.
And do you think Will Smith gave him permission?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So you kind of thought, no way, one and done. I think I was with you. I agreed. Like, I was like, no, it's Will Smith. Like, you know, they're not just like us. You know, stars like us, not so much, right? But I guess if last night was any example, then fuck, you know, the comics are very vulnerable, more so,
well,
you know, than
when
we
you
had
talk
hoped.
about security, what I find funny is that the average comedy club seems to have better security than the Oscars or the Hollywood Bowl.
You could take your phone out at the Improv and they will find you within 2 seconds.
Right.
So put that down. You know, somebody's always there. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, and if you go for the stage, and I have seen some funny instances. The funniest one I saw a comic going for the stage. This is back in the day when we did Dublins in Hollywood. Paula Bell was on stage, and you know Paula has a mouth on her, and Paula, you know, might strike some people the wrong way. And this guy started going toward the stage, and the security guy came up behind him and picked him up, but he scooped him up like a baby. He actually held him in his arms because they had some big guys. But you're not going to get to the stage in a comedy club. You got to be quick. You got to be all right up front. But and I've been to the Hollywood Bowl. It's not easy to get on stage at the Hollywood Bowl. As a matter of fact, this is great. You will see some of the older performers who like to jump in the audience, and then they have to have someone help them back up on stage. You're like, oh yeah, you were doing that 20 years ago. You don't jump now.
Yeah, just the physical stretch of it is hard.
Well,
like,
he was 23.
Oh, he was young. Yeah.
Yeah, but. You know, and let's be honest, he got his ass whipped.
He did.
He got his ass whipped, and today he's in jail, charged with attempted murder because he had a weapon. And you know, today he's probably going to find out Dave has fans in jail.
Oh.
I'm guessing when you go to LA County Jail, there are some Dave Chappelle fans there that may want to have a talk with you about attacking Dave Chappelle. You know, but. So in the aftermath, I think he's going to rethink this and be like, nah, it probably wasn't a great idea. But do you think the industry is going to step up on behalf of comics?
I do. I think we have no choice.
But what does that look like?
I think more security. I think people being more aware of what's going on. I think it opens a huge conversation. And it's also... you know, what comics do, they're expressing themselves. And, you know, it doesn't give somebody the right to go up and hit somebody if they don't agree with what they're saying on stage.
I think we have to retrain audiences. They become incredibly sensitive and incredibly enraged, but you're at a comedy club. You are there. I mean, the Oscars maybe aside, even though that joke was not very inflammatory at all. I mean, certainly I haven't read a lot of this stuff because we were out last night, but what was his reasoning? Was he...
I haven't heard anything about his reasoning or like what Dave said. I don't think it was that Dave said one particular joke that set this guy off. I think this guy was like the people who run on a football field during a game. Like they plan it in advance. This is, I'm going to have my moment. I think he's probably more of that, but they haven't really said anything about the motive.
But what was did he have a weapon?
Supposedly he had a fake gun that had a knife in it, which is a crazy weapon, right? Like
it sounds like something you get at the novelty store, at the magic store with the guy with the missing tooth and the emo hair, like goth hair.
But so much for security at the Hollywood Bowl because they do have the metal detectors and they do have.
Well, I don't know about that, but as far as you said, what will security look like? I think that the security guy who used to stand off to the side or in the back of the room is going to be standing next to the stage or as close to the stage as possible in various clubs. And you know, I was that guy, right? I started my career as that door guy. It sucks because it's not the energy you want.
Right.
You don't want to be the naysayer in a fucking comedy club.
Right. And then you have to figure out when to jump in versus what the comic's doing. It ruins it. And to your point about people coming to a comedy club, I was late here because I was doing an interview about this on local radio. And I said, we're comedians. Like, we're not politicians. We don't set policy. Mm-hmm. We're not teachers. We're not subverting your kids. You came to see us. You paid money to come to a room to listen to what someone has to say, and then you're going to start yelling that they're not allowed to say. It's insane. It is snowflake insanity. It is. I mean, it
is totally. As a comic, what would make you feel safer? I mean,
well, personally,
you don't have a lot.
I'm not going. I'm 6'3", 270. I ain't got to worry personally, but. I think that's what it is. I think security is going to have to be closer to the stage. I also think, and clubs used to do this, I haven't heard this much, they'll give you a code. They used to say something like, hey, can you buy her a drink? And that means go shut her up. Or that you would have some kind of code with the manager or with the security of the club that when I say this, that get rid of that person. And I think that
code that all the comics know to say.
Yeah, it would just be something you before the show. It's like a safe word. See, now I don't want to get in your private life because
you saw me light up.
See.
That's in the part 2 of the interview later on.
But they used to say that you'd have something you would say that lets them know, and I think that's what it's going to have to go back to, because the other thing you can't stop is you can't stop a natural back and forth between a comic, and it might be a heckler or it just might be some person, you can, like Todd Barry could never work again, right?
Right. Well, that's right. There were comics whose half their acts, or if not all of it, is
Ian Bagg headlined last night. He did 4 minutes. Couldn't talk to the audience.
Yeah, so you can't stop that back and forth.
Right. You can't make that.
But that also adds to your act, and it adds to the ambiance. It adds to a live comedy show. It's a spontaneity.
My favorite thing, I always tell people, my favorite thing is something funny in that moment, and you can never duplicate that moment. It was just a perfect moment with the audience and this and that, and you had the line, and everybody loved it. And that's why you go to a live show versus watching a show.
Exactly. That's what makes live so special, and that's why we've all fell in love with the art of comedy.
Yeah, and also Jessica Kirson, brilliantly funny woman to everybody listening. Just look up and follow Jessica. But we were talking about this. Comedy is the only art form. For one thing, they call it an art form. I think it is, but we don't sit around calling each other artists. We don't take ourselves that seriously. But it's the only one where people will stop you to tell you they don't like it. Like somebody, I'm a comic. Yeah, I don't like stand-up. Like no one says to it, oh, you're an actor? Yeah, I can't stand movies. I hate movies. You with your Broadway and your singing. Like, people will go out of their way to tell comics 100%. That they don't like comedy. It's the strangest thing. I
actually worked with somebody at Comedy Central, who remain nameless, who actually boldly stated, I don't like stand-up. I'm like, God, I think you're at the wrong place. I mean, we developed scripted programs. It's like, you kind of have to start to like stand up. It was crazy to me. I'm like, why are you working here?
Yeah, there's no one working at the Grammys. You know, this music thing.
Yeah.
I can't stand
it.
this melodic noise
Putting
that
your
they
notes
produce.
together and stringing them. I hate it.
We're the only ones who, and they'll come and like they're, you know, the
They're your
funny thing
buddies.
about it. Yeah, like they're
I
really.
feel like they feel comfortable, and it's like, oh, my buddy. It's like, I can go tell him.
Yeah, they must want to hear my opinion.
Man, you imagine getting on a plane and just looking in the cockpit. Oh, I can't stand pilots. If there's one group that I don't like, it's these flyboys driving airplanes.
I want to call them flyboys from now on.
I was on a flight. This is back when the door was open and you could have a sense of humor. And the flight was delayed, and I kept yelling, "Driver, when are we moving?" And he every time I did it, he would just start cracking up. I just kept
The
calling
good
him
old
driver.
days.
Yeah.
With cockpit door wide open.
Yeah.
But I mean, look, you know, they became vulnerable. They closed the door. And speaking to
Right.
the comics thing, I think, you know, having that security person stand close to the stage. I also saw after the Will Smith thing, you know, and I'm sure other clubs did it, but like on social media, the Stand had that sign that said, if you do what Will Smith, you know, did,
Right.
you will look like that. And they had a funny sign, like with the, you know, kind of a bar through Will Smith's face, like, you're not welcome here if that's your behavior. And I think clubs should make the announcement. I think it should be like, so people know it's not tolerated. It doesn't mean people won't do it.
Yeah,
I think, you know, go, that's not the forum for your, like, the stage is the sacred place for the comedian. You know, that old joke with the, you know, the audience person with their shoe on or their foot on the stage,
Right.
and the comic goes, are you in show business? No, get your foot off the fucking stage.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, the stage is sacred.
It would be nice, Zoe, to do that. I think what they do, they are making an announcement. I've worked a couple of clubs where they've made an announcement like, do not approach the stage. There's
Do you
plain
think that
and
makes
simple.
it more like enticing? Like, whoa, what would happen?
Yeah, it puts the idea in the mind of crazy people. That's you know, and again, I don't want to make the whole podcast about this, but that is the problem with our society now. You know, the extreme, like, again, with this interview I was doing on radio, he talked about the fact that the guy had a weapon. And I said, yeah, well, weapons are everywhere. We have school shootings, you have mall shootings. Like, that's just part of our society now. So if anything, sadly, comedy clubs, I guess, are late to the party. But you know, somebody pulling out a weapon. I mean, everywhere. You know, movie theaters, right? It's
Schools, right?
Yeah,
like schools seems to be the worst. I mean, yeah.
So
Right.
unfortunately.
The last
The
bastion.
warning against it might set them off, and then
Okay.
I don't know. You know, you also get into the thing, and this is where lawyers come in legal liability. I wouldn't be surprised if some lawyer wants to sue on behalf of the guy who got beat up for attacking Dave Chappelle.
I'm sure. Somebody tried to-
You know what I mean?
Totally.
You know,
That's our world today.
There's some lawyer that's like, whoa.
I got a case.
I got a case. They're not allowed to beat you up just because you attacked him. Oh, and he got his ass whooped too. It was
Somebody said his arm got.
Roy Wood Jr. taught me a term that I didn't know. It's called the mollywop. Yes, to be mollywopped is to have your ass with, and this guy got mollywopped. So
Last night, Chappelle was saying after the fact, he was like, the guy rushed stage and we're okay and we're stronger together. He goes, but I thought it was funny that Jon Stewart, Jeff Ross, like the small little Jew guys are like all on top of this guy. And, you know, like, I mean, it was so fast, so many. And I think Dave felt protected, even though he was vulnerable for the moment. And I thought it was funny, like the idea of Jon Stewart and Jeff Ross, like protecting Dave, who's
well,
like,
you know, if this was Dave 10 years ago, that dude would have really been in trouble when Dave was heavy bodybuilding. But I understand Jamie Foxx was there too, and Jamie's always in shape. But now Jamie's like playing Mike Tyson, so Jamie was probably in. You know, you picked the wrong night.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if you want to attack a stage, a Wednesday night open mic. Like, start there, work your way up. You don't start at the Hollywood Bowl. You earn it just like we did. All right.
What's the old joke? How did you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice. How did you get
Exactly.
to Hollywood Bowl? Not rushing the stage.
Exactly. You start beating up open micers, all right, and then we will let
Work your way up.
hit some people at a bringer show, right? You got to bring some friends, and then you'll get to beat them up Thursday and Sunday. But we headliners will be there Friday, Saturday, and after a few years, if you get tight, we'll let you hit somebody at the Hollywood Bowl. Okay.
Once you earn your stripes, right?
Gotta earn it. Can't start at the top.
Can't start with it. Oh my God.
All right. So now let's talk about Comedy Gives Back, because this is a thing that I think a lot of people and a lot of fans of comedy don't realize, because we see the big names. We see Dave Chappelle. We see, Jon Stewart, Bill Burr, Jeff Ross. We see the millionaires. And then there's guys like me. We're the workers. We're the grinders, but we make a good living doing it. People don't see, like I joked about it, but honestly, the feature acts who were making $50 or $100 a show, when the pandemic hit, that went away, and that was all they had. They
didn't have stuff sort of. Yeah.
You're the organization that steps in and helps. So let's talk about that, how it started, and how did it work for the last couple of years?
So we've been around for a while, since 2011, Comedy Gives Back started, and we changed our focus in about 2018 to focus on stand-up comedians. It wasn't pandemic related, it was pre-pandemic. You look around at, we were talking about artists with a capital A, you're looking around and actors have actors fund, and musicians has music cares, and then the comedians didn't have an organization that was supporting them. And so we kind of had this aha moment. We used to do comedy, charity, and technology and fundraise for different 501c3s. And we said, we need to be the 501c3 and we need to support the stand-up community. So we were ready to open our doors kind of January 2020. We had a fundraiser in 2019. And then pandemic hit. And we sort of had a zig and zag, as we all did. And we produced Laugh Aid, which was a great digital digithon, I guess, fundraiser with all things comedy right here, supporting, helping us. And we raised $500,000 that night. But the most astounding statistic of that night was that we got over 4,000 individual donations. Because when we would speak about Comedy Gives Back, we're like, is this just comedians giving back
helping other comedians?
Because we know that happens without our organization. We know comics help other comics. So what I think that says is people valued comedy. They realized the plight, because, like you said, there are the people we all know, the Kevin Harts, nobody, they're fine. Then there's the group that have diversified.
You think Kevin's okay? You think Kevin made it?
I think he's going to be okay. I think he's going to be okay.
He probably had the rent paid.
Yeah, I think he has maybe one or 2 months stored.
Maybe The Rock helped him out.
Yeah, maybe, right? But there were these feature acts, the people who were just starting to book, come in March. They were just starting to go on their first tour, their big college, and then everything. The rug totally pulled out. It was one of the few professions. There was no, Zoom shows hadn't really started. There was really loss of income. And people who had podcasts and other diversified ways were okay. And there was a whole swath of comedians. And we gave over 1,000 grants starting on April 5th, 2020 to comedians. We also have supported about 25 comedians who are receiving mental health therapy. And we've put 3 comedians through chemical dependency treatment.
That's great. And another thing that came up, and I don't know, you guys are in New York, so I don't know what the rules are. Yeah. Jody, you're in New York. I don't know what the rules are there. But here, initially, they couldn't get unemployment. And one of the things we laughed at was, you could be a carny, you could be a ride operator at a carnival. There was a category for them to collect unemployment, but stand up. No disrespect to carnies, they got to live too. But it was there was a category for them to get unemployment, but not for stand-up comics. And we were really like, wow,
wow.
How
low are we?
Where exactly are we in this show business?
In New York, we were able to. I think comics were able to collapse.
And I think it changed.
It changed, but they changed it to where if you were, they lumped them in the category of the gig economy. And if you were in the gig economy, you could start collecting. But initially, we were definitely laughing about that fact. Like, man, I should have went to the carnival.
I should have done that. I think we did a workshop in our sort of virtual gatherings through pandemic to teach comedians how to file for unemployment. Because comedians might not be the people that are the most sort of high-functioning people. Know how to fill out a form or two.
Paperwork, no.
Well, I will say this. I work with a lot of musicians. We're better than them.
Oh, good to hear. Good to hear. No. See the hierarchy of that.
They are. You take that instrument out of their hands, and they're like, "I'll just be here. I'm just going to sit in this spot." I have a friend who's a musician who has missed 2 flights while sitting at the gate at the airport. He was there, and no one said, "Get up and get on the plane," and he just was in his own head in his headphones. And
it happens.
Yeah. So not to say that no comic has ever done that, but at least a comic we know was high at the time. We know. So that is great that you've helped so many comics, and now you're here in the midst of Netflix is a Joke, which is turning out to be a huge comedy festival, comedy happening, and you're doing things with this. This is the fun part. Okay. And by the way, to everyone listening, you can text LAUGH, LAUGH, to 707070 and donate money to help comics, because this has to keep going past the pandemic, because you said, the mental health issues, health issues, chemical dependency. And also you can go to comedygivesback.com and you can give there, and you don't have to give a ton of money. Like whatever you can do will help, because as Zoe said, when you have 4,000 people donating, even a few bucks each, it makes a big difference. Makes a huge difference. And we have moved out of kind of our pandemic relief model, and yet we know a lot of the financial crisis relief that we're doing is still kind of related to sort of the deficit that the pandemic created in, comics, wallets, and, income. So the fun part is Netflix is a Joke. The festival is happening in Los Angeles right now. And Netflix has been actually an amazing partner to Comedy Gives Back through pandemic. And a couple things going on is we have a comedian versus industry basketball game this Sunday, which I think it's May 8th. Yes. Am I right? At 11 a.m., we think. We're going to get you the details. And it's at 11 a.m. 11 a.m., and all the proceeds go to Comedy Gives Back. So it's at Los Angeles City College. And go to Netflix is a Joke, the festival, to get tickets. And the other thing for the other side, so we're an organization that we serve a community, so we're sort of inside facing to the resources and to support the comedians. And then we have some outside facing thing. But one of the things we have going on is a 12-step recovery meeting every day of the festival at 1 o'clock at the Improv. And that is something that Music Cares does for musicians through Coachella, Stagecoach, the Grammys. Whenever there's a gathering of musicians, there will be that meeting. So we're doing the same. We did it at Austin at Moon Tower. We did 4 days of meetings. We are doing the full 10 days of this festival, and we'll be in Just for Laughs with the same kind of support. Now, I want to talk about festivals, because festivals are very cool, and I love them. So, Jody, we met at Just for Laughs, which we did. Is it the biggest comedy festival in the world? I think it is, but I'm not sure. I mean, we can't. Edinburgh is like, that's a whole summer. You got to live there, so we're not going to. It's the biggest comedy festival in North America. JFL is huge, and Zoe, you work with Moon Tower, which is in Austin, which is like the hottest, coolest place. Well, they joined forces this year too, Just for Laughs and Moon Tower. Right. So to the listeners, because people always ask me about this, I tell them this is what's great about comedy festivals. There's a bunch of comics who are headliners who normally would never cross paths because we're all touring separately and, stuff like that. And we also have more fun being together, which leads the shows to be better, because when you have a show, you don't know who's going to drop in on the show. Just like now, Netflix is a Joke and Dave Chappelle's up, and then you have, who knows who's going to drop in for Jon Stewart or Dion Cole or Chris Rock or whatever, because they're in town. Talk about the festival atmosphere and how that, and also how that helps with you guys, because I know we do benefits there, and how it helps with comics, I don't know, mental health, well-being, everything else, to be around our own people. Well, first of all, I think
festivals promote a very camp-like atmosphere. I always said Just for Laughs was like comedy camp.
Summer camp.
And
it's community.
It's very much a community. And look, I'm not a stand-up comic, so I don't know how the comics feel.
I am, and we love it.
Yeah.
But what about the competition? Do you feel that competition when you're there?
Early on, you feel the competition. Like when I did New Faces, back to the listeners, New Faces of Comedy used to be the breakout show. This was before the internet. A lot of people we really were new faces. They didn't know who we were. And the studios and networks and they would literally bid on you and give you a contract while you were there. I was in one of the last years when they did that. There's a sense of competition, but after a while, you learn, no, I'm doing my own thing, and now I'm here to have fun and see my friends because, he's got a 1-hour show here and she's doing a 30-minute show there, and I'm doing a showcase on, some big gala. So we're not in competition.
But that's great saying that for the younger comics coming up, because I feel that there's so much pressure on them at those festivals.
Early on there is, and there should be.
Well, there's
Toughen
only 10 new faces or 20 new faces, whereas once you get past that, there's, at JFL, there's the Club Soda shows, and there's,
the Galas,
the main line, and there's so many different venues. But I love your perspective. And what I experienced, I went to the outdoor space on Friday at the Netflix Just for Laughs. Jimmy Carr, Leslie Jones, Catherine Ryan, Jim Jeffries, all in one show, all together. And I was like, so when you said that, I was like, oh, right, where would I really get to see all of them? Usually everybody's at their own thing. Right. And that is so great about festivals. I thought it was off the stage where the community comes in. But what I'm hearing is it's the community on the shows too, that you get to perform with your friends who you normally don't get to,
and you get to see your friends.
Right. You get to see them. Right.
You don't see their act. I mean, where am I going to see Bobby Kelly's act?
Right. You guys are on the road all the time.
He's working. He's working in Tampa, and I'm working in Chicago or something like that. So now we get to see each other.
Right.
And when you talk about the camaraderie, the laughter between comics is something that they've tried to capture on numerous shows. You really can't capture the organic laughter when we're together because there's such a shorthand. There's we're the exact opposite of the world. It's impossible to offend us. And if you're offended, we're leaning in.
That's right.
Like that.
We're gonna make
the
it
worst
worse.
thing you want to do is show a weakness because we're like, oh, okay, that one gets you.
Well, that even
and
happened.
It's all love.
Yeah, it's all in love.
It even happened with us when we did Comedy Gives Back Laugh Aid back in April of 2020. We were all on Zoom, and we had the backstage room on Zoom, and we had, Adam Sandler and all these other comics and Jim Gaffigan and
it was like the show behind the show, and nobody had seen each other for 3 weeks,
and it was 3 weeks at that time, and everyone's like, oh my God, we haven't seen you, because I do think in LA and New York, at least those comics tend to hang out a little bit more together. And we said that was the funny show. Like, we wish we could have encapsulated that because it was so much fun. And, being a festival producer, we always try to say, like, what are those fun shows where you can really see the back, and then we're at the backstage and like really what's in the mind of a comic. And then you're like, is that funny to an audience? And then you have to like kind of figure that out.
I think usually, but sometimes we go too far for an audience. It's funny to an audience that loves stand-up, but sometimes a general audience is like, yeah, we're going too far. But we know it. We're okay with that. So on the topic of comics and you big names and so on, talk to me about, you mentioned it briefly, paying it forward. I think a lot of comics who have achieved some level of success are quite generous with helping comics who haven't yet. And some of the comics who have achieved huge success help other comics. But this is what I've found. So tell me if this is true. Anonymously.
Yes.
100%. You know what's going on. Like you said, comics are helping comics, and that might be kind of, they're helping their friend who didn't make it. And I think there's a lot of I think comics have like success guilt, you know, like.
Really? You think so?
I do. I do. Oh, okay,
Yeah,
good. I was like, right,
absolutely
like you. Oh, I'm not worthy, and why did I make it? And my friends did, you know, and I think there is a taking care of.
I also think it's because also everybody has worked so hard to come up. I don't think anyone just becomes a funny stand-up. Like, yes, there's innate, and people are better and have better stage presence, but I think anyone who's at that level of success and stardom has worked so hard to achieve that.
And yeah, and they support the friends.
Oh, yeah, of course.
You know,
because they understand what it's like to be that road comic, because they were there. Right. Even though they're now doing movies or they're playing stadiums, they were once that comic that did that horrible college gig or, you know, who bombed at a festival or who was on the road by themselves. Like, I think everybody has that heartfelt because they were there at one point in their lives and in their careers.
And I think comics are doing it and helping them. When I worked at Letterman, I booked comics, and I know Letterman was like, you book Jeff Altman and George Miller and John Witherspoon twice a year. It was very prescriptive, very specific. And it sort of took me a moment to realize, oh, then they got their SAG-AFTRA insurance.
Yeah.
And he was helping his friends. I mean, he might have also helped them by writing checks. I don't know. But he was bringing them on. Besides, that helps their career and makes them kind of have their, you know, he took care of his friends that way. And it is our ethos to make sure comedians have insurance if they need insurance, have, you know, and comedians even who are successful might need help resourcing chemical dependency treatment. Like, doesn't mean just because you have the funds doesn't mean you don't need help also. And yes, you can probably find somebody to help you, but we help all different.
It's also some comics who had success no longer have success and need that help.
That's
and
right.
We want to be there for the entire community, and that's really important that we are there for the small person, the bigger person, whoever really needs help. And it can be across the board, like we said, financial crisis, you know, mental health therapy, chemical dependency treatment.
But what needs to happen is comedians actually, I believe, and I think now that we're moving out of pandemic and stand-up seems to be kind of in full swing in terms of selling, clubs are crowded, people are back in, all of that.
And occasionally baseball stadiums.
And occasionally baseball stadiums, 100%. I really think there's going to be a new industry standard where comedians give a percentage of their tour, a night of their tour, to support Comedy Gives Back. Imagine if every comic gave a small percentage, and I'm talking about the Kevin Harts and the Gabriel Iglesias, the ones who are selling out the Dodger stadiums, who, of course, they work very hard for every penny. But again, this is a way they can help their brethren. And I think that's what I feel we can move towards, that it is this sort of comedy is giving back, in addition to the public.
That's what we're trying to do. Like we are going, we've been having meetings and trying to get the word out that, if comedy clubs gave a quarter a ticket back to Comedy Goes Back, we can help so many people. Like, you don't realize how many tickets that they sell.
Well, yeah, I do, because they put plaques on the wall to let us know who sold how many.
Exactly.
That's a Joe Coy thing we have. I was at the Improv in Brea, and they had a plaque up that Joe Coy sold like 17,000 some odd tickets. So I called him up and said, yeah, Joe, I didn't. Right. Just so you know. So you can relax. But on that topic of the collective, have you guys looked into helping us with things like a group health insurance plan and things like that? And these are the things that nobody realized, like you talked about making your SAG insurance, right? So if you're an actor, and I'm talking to listeners now, because I used to occasionally work in acting, and I always said my goal was to make insurance. Like, if you make X number of dollars, you get health insurance from SAG. But there's never been anything like that for stand-up comics, and your organization seems to me the type that could approach having some kind of group coverage. We are figuring it out actually as we speak, because to become a health insurance exchange is a little bit off of what our model is. It's not to say we can't do it, but what would need to happen is everybody in the community, an exchange only works in numbers. Mm-hmm. So it would have to be you, and it would have to be Taylor Williamson, and it would have to be like Jim Gaffigan all getting on the exchange. It would be the only way we could actually bring
the rates low enough to really be meaningful.
Right.
But there are so many other resources that we are exploring. And so once we figure out, but one is the Motion Picture Television Fund is a resource for everybody in entertainment. We have a social worker there who works with us, which we were introduced through the Comedy Store Family Fund. And now they have opened up their social worker resources, and they're for anybody in entertainment. So they have, if you're having health or medical issues, they have a social worker and we could refer. There's also a whole insurance department that will resource affordable, like a plan that makes sense for you and a plan that makes sense for Jody and a plan that makes sense for me, not one size fits all. Then it's a possibility that Comedy Gives Back can reimburse or pay for those premiums for a year, right? We talk about Brody Stevens a lot. It's a comedian who we lost to mental illness. He took his life in 2019. And, it's a really good example. He was on a show on HBO. He had SAG-AFTRA, a Writers Guild, one of the insurances. The show was canceled. He lost his insurance. He couldn't afford Cobra. So he switched to whatever, an HMO, whatever he could afford. And he changed doctors. And it was sort of in that transition of doctors and medication that he had this night that was unmanageable.
Right.
Again, mental illness could never claim that we could change it. But what if we were around at that point and he could come to us and say, hey, I want to stay on Cobra. I like my doctors. I want to stay in this program. And we could pay the Comedy Gives Back could pay the insurance premium for a year for that comic. So we will have an announcement soon what that looks like, but we have been really meaningfully exploring that because it is not okay for comics to not feel supported in health insurance and have medical insurance, And there's all these like new telehealth and Uber Doc, and there's programs that might actually be less expensive than traditional insurance that might actually be
better,
perfect for a stand-up who's on the road who can take a picture of a rash, send it in, and have like a prescription at the CVS in the town they're in, sent there. So we are working on it really as we speak to try to figure out the best solution.
So, and we're going to wrap up soon, but I want to talk now on behalf of comics who are listening. I know there are comics who listen to my podcast, and I appreciate that. But how do they access the resources? Because you talked about some things that we as comics all deal with, depression, substance abuse. I've been sober, clean and sober for 34 years now.
Fuck yeah.
Terrible timing. I got clean before my career. I should have went to rehab right after Last Comic Standing. It would have been a better career move. I'd have been much more famous. But no, I got to give up drugs before I start. And once again, timing off. But no, all kidding
Comedy's
aside.
all timing.
Yeah, comedy's all timing. My timing was horrible. I could have relapsed or something, but no, But
well,
anyway.
No, I don't wish that.
But no, you talk about that. You talk about therapy, which I've been in and out of. And I will say one thing I have learned, and I talk to people about this, that's really helpful, and talk to me how you help with this. Finding out you're not the only one. The comic's life is an isolated life. We travel alone, we hit the stage alone, we see the two other comics on the show on the road for that weekend, and then we go our separate ways. We don't travel with a band or, road managers and all that. The big stars do, but most of us don't. We spend a lot of time alone. How does Comedy Give Back? How do you let the comics listening and people listening know that you're not the only one?
You're not the only ones. We're saying it right now. We've had a list. We had, over 1,000 comics come to us for help during the pandemic. As Joey said before, we have about 30 comics now getting mental health therapy.
So do they go to the website? How do they?
Yes.
So you could email
more
help.
Specifically, like how do they contact you?
You can go to the website and there will be directives how to do it, but help@comedygivesback.com. And with any of those concerns, I'm looking for rehab, I'm looking for therapy, I'm looking for suicide prevention, I'm looking for social work. If we don't have the support, we'll find it. We have a lot of smart people on our board and a lot of people who are aligned with helping and we figure it out. But just email help@comedygoesback.com and somebody will get back to you and we will start the process of whatever that looks like. We have an application we could send for financial crisis relief. So that's like, hey, I'm a comedian, I've fallen behind on my rent. And you meet the criteria, which is, you've been a comic for a certain amount of years, just so we're not
right. You're working as a comic.
That's right.
That's exactly. That's
we have to make sure, right?
You have to be a working comic and earning a living through a comic, and not, be an open mic who just started and has another job and they're doing comedy and making $25 a week. So we do have our criteria, but it's a form to fill out, and we're all around,
and then and its process is fast. We know things are timely, and we try to figure it out as quickly as we can. If we don't have the resources, we'll say we'll get right back to you. And if somebody is struggling, comics who are alone and feel alone on the road, and we're not a 24/7 suicide prevention hotline, but I would suggest for every comic to have that in their back pocket, because by the way, that number is not just if you're feeling suicidal. It could be a friend is acting weird. I'm worried about them. They haven't called me back. They usually do. Somebody will sit and tell you what to do, how to access that friend. Or even if you're just feeling like it is that 24/7 access, and it doesn't have to be when you feel like, oh no, I'm just about to pull the trigger.
Right.
It's
and that's valuable, because a lot of times people don't know how to deal with a friend going through something.
Mm-hmm. It's the hardest. You don't know what to say.
And it helps if you have someone
to talk to
who knows what to say. And also, I mean, the fact that you guys have worked with comics your whole careers on whether it be booking, managing, this and that, you know how we work. A friend of mine, he said, yeah, we're all the broken toys. It's like, yeah, we're the broken toys.
The misfits,
and we figured out how to market it, and we use that. But it's also good that, as I'll say this as a comic, I appreciate the fact that you guys understand that, because when you go to certain other organizations, right? Even the darkness of what comic, like this, we have a dark sense of humor, and we will say something horrible, but you guys know, okay, he meant that, or, oh, she was just kidding. Again, I will mention Jessica Kirson. If you followed her, there would be a whole team of therapists. There wouldn't be anyone. There would be a whole team working constantly, figuring out what's going on. And we're like, relax, she's brilliant. That's, and I appreciate that. And I'm going to speak on behalf of the comics. We appreciate having an organization that helps us and also understands us.
Oh. Yeah, I mean,
but Alonzo, you've also been so supportive from us from day one.
Anybody listening has to know, Alonzo has been Team Comedy Goes Back from the very, very beginning. He was one of the reasons when we realized comedians said yes to like eradicate malaria or water project in Haiti, and I was like, that's not impacting them, and yet they're saying yes to these nights. And nobody, there's a lot of people fundraising for international global prices, all good, valuable prices.
I'm not worried about malaria.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I got a shot.
But you also did the gig for us in Montreal when we used to go to Hope and Cope, and in the middle of the day in a yoga studio with no mic, no stage,
no air conditioning,
and no lights, and you were there always saying yes to us. So we appreciate it from the bottom of our heart. And, we're so grateful to you.
Well, thank you. And it is our organization, right? It's helping each other. It's paying it forward. And if I can do that and I can be a part of that, to me, that's a cool thing, right? Charity begins at home. Mm-hmm. And, I don't have Kevin Hart or Russell Peters money. I can't write those checks, but I can do a set. Matter of fact, I think Russell Peters should pay me for doing those sets. I actually think so. I'm going to have to get in touch with him.
Absolutely. But yeah, Russell, if you're listening, write that check, and one to Alonzo, one to us.
But I think this is so important, just to interrupt, that we're getting the word out to the community, and more now that we were at Moon Tower and we're at Netflix and we'll be at Just for Laughs, that more and more people know about us. So yes, we're there to help. And then the people that could help us and donate.
Yeah, and I just want to say, like, to the comedians, like, we get it. You have the most solo career you could have ever picked. Maybe underwater welder, maybe a close second or whatever. And our whole motto is being on stage alone is part of the job. Feeling alone off stage is unacceptable.
That's
and,
great.
And I think comedians, it's hard to ask for help for anybody. And I have been amazed and floored and humbled by people's, I don't want to overuse the word brave, but, put themselves out there to do testimonials that they received money from us, or we put them into rehab and they want to speak on our behalf. Not everybody likes that because there isn't an anonymity about needing help.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of a shame. And let me just say also, anybody who comes to us, it is totally anonymous. We honor that. We appreciate anybody who wants to speak that, how we've helped them, because that only helps get our message out. But that's kind of what I want to say. Yeah.
Well, I want to say to Zoe and Jody, the comedy team of Zoe and Jody, I want to say thank you guys for coming on. I'm going to say it again to the listeners. Help us, help comics out until we can get the clubs to donate a little piece of each ticket. Send a few bucks. It's comedygivesback.com, right? Yep. Or you text laugh to 707070 and give a little something. You've been watching us on YouTube and laughing for free.
Netflix.
All right, now we're TikToking. I went viral on TikTok, and I had to get a TikTok account because it was great. They put up a video out of helium, and it went viral, and I was like, I'm too old for TikTok. Apparently I'm not. So thank you to the TikTokers. But if you're watching us on video or something, just send us a couple of bucks and help us out. I appreciate it on behalf of everybody at Comedy Gives Back. Zoe and Jody appreciate it, and you're helping the comedy community. Thanks, you two.
Thank you, Alonzo. Thanks for having us.
Also, they have a golf tournament coming up this fall. Okay, you can go to the website, check it out. You can sign up to play golf with your favorite comedians. I promise you, they're not better than you. They're okay, but they're really not that good.
And if they are better, then they're not that funny because they haven't been working on their stand-up. They've been working on their
There you go. So.
Yes, November 14th. Reach out on the website. We'll hook you up for a team.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alonzo. We adore you. Appreciate you.